Not yet a misbehaved
Right, thank you everyone for coming. I was really sorry to not be able to come on the trip after having sort of thought about it since we created the group. So that was very bad timing for a cold, but yeah, life. So I've heard from different people that you all had a lovely time. So I'm very glad. That's the most important thing. And I have been to the Spanish gallery. So at least I have been, because if I hadn't been, I would have been kicking myself. But at least I've been. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to give a presentation on Spanish Golden Age art in general. And then Rose is going to jump in with some of the pictures that you saw yesterday, and just to have a bit of discussion of what you enjoyed, what you didn't, or whatever. So, I have made a very long presentation. So, are we ready to have 250 years of history, 46 slides in about 30-35 minutes? Yeah! Yeah, I am not, so wish me luck. So prayer to St. Lucy. So, in the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen. Father, can you see that?
Just. Would you like me to say?
Please. Thank you. You can.
O St. Lucy, you preferred to let your eyes be torn out instead of denying the faith and dividing your soul. And God, through an extraordinary miracle, replaced them with another pair of sound and perfect eyes to reward your virtue and faith, appointing you as the protector against eye diseases. I come to you for you to protect my eyesight and heal the illness in my eyes. O St. Lucy, preserve the light of my eyes that I may see the beauties of creation, the glow of the sun, the colour of the flowers, and the smile of children. Preserve also the eyes of my soul, the faith, through which I can know my God, understand his teachings, recognise his love for me, and never miss the road that leads me to where you, St. Lucy, can be found in the company of the angels and saints. O St. Lucy, protect my eyes and preserve my faith. Amen.
Father, the Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you, Father. And that painting is by Francisco de Zurbarán, which I'm sure you're all familiar with because you've been to the Spanish gallery. So just in general, to introduce the Golden Age, I based the presentation on the book by Jonathan Brown, which is one of the most famous American Hispanists, if that's a word, experts on Spanish arts. That I think he died very recently, actually, like only last year. So that's been really useful because it's a very complex period. Like I said, it's about 250 years of very different currents, very different artists, but in essence, it's basically a great flourishing of the arts, of all the arts as well. Not only the visual arts, but also poetry, theatre, literature in general. So, like you see, the dates are always orientative in some way, but you can take 1474, the start of the reign of the Catholic monarchs, as the start of the Golden Age, if you like, and 1700, the end of the Spanish Habsburg dynasty, as the end. So two main concepts that I wanted to have very clear is that sort of influence what the Golden Age is in Spain, is the influence of Italian and Flemish art. So in this time, Spain was the center of politics, but it wasn't the center of art at all. The centers of art were in Italy and in the Netherlands. But of course, parts of Italy and parts of the Netherlands were parts of the Spanish Empire by then. So as you can see in the map, I know it's a little bit small, but Spanish had the kingdoms of Naples and Sicily, the Duchy of Milan. They also had influence over other Italian states. They also had the loyalty of Savoy, which is somewhere around there. And also they had, at the start of this period, they had the whole Netherlands. And then at the end of the 16th century, with the formation of the Dutch Republic, they only had the southern part, which is what they call Flanders. But yeah, so when we think about the Spanish Golden Age, we have to think of not only Spanish painters, but painters from Italy and from the north that came to Spain, either physically came to Spain or sent works to Spain by commission. And some of them were actually Spanish subjects, like Rubens, for example, or Luca Giordano, as we will see. And Spanish painters were all acquainted with this work of these artists as well, but they reinterpreted them in their own way. The other big concept is the relationship between patron and painter. So there were lots of different sort of waves of influence arriving into the country, and different patrons reacted in different ways. So some imposed new fashions, others rejected them, and painters were very much determined by what their patrons wanted. So it was a very hierarchical relationship, because it was a very hierarchical society as well. And that meant that the spread of these trends was very diverse depending on the region. So especially in the 16th century, it makes more sense to talk of Catalan, Valencian, Castilian or Andalusian art than Spanish art, because there was no such as a thing as Spanish art. And I just brought you this example of Pedro Berruguete. So he was from Castile. He was trained in this sort of Hispano-Flemish style, but he went on a trip to Italy, and in this painting of the Temptation of St. Thomas for the altarpiece of St. Thomas Church in Avila, he sort of mixes everything a little bit. So he has the Flemish influence, so you have quite long or elongated figures, the cardboard-like sort of folds of the garments. And if you see the faces and the expressions of the angels, they look very, very similar to these angels here by Jan van Eyck. So you see the Flemish influence there, but you also see the Italian influence in the monumentality of the figures. If St. Thomas were to stand up right now, he would hit his head on the ceiling. Like the perspective is there, so the illusion of space is there, but it's all wrong. Like if you actually look at it and you look at the proportions, it's all wrong. It gives you the illusion of it, which is the point. But that monumentality of figures, and if you look at the face of the lady who is on the far right, she looks very much like Botticelli's Venus. So he had obviously come into contact with that. And then if you look at the ceiling of the room, that's the type of wood pattern ceiling that you would find in the Mudéjar style, the style of the Christians that lived in the Islamic parts of Spain during the occupation. So, and you have an example of a real ceiling here, so it looks very, very similar to the one in the painting. So he's mixing lots of stuff. There are three very broad phases that we can sort of divide this period into, which are the ones that are there, but we will go into it anyway. The first one is the most complex one, because like I said, 16th century is all a mix of different waves of influence from Italy, from the north, and every patron did whatever they wanted to do, basically. Second phase is mainly the reign of Philip II, and he centralized everything in Madrid, both art and politics and economy, everything centralized, and established the crown as the main patron. So that changed things quite a bit. And then the third phase is his grandson, Philip IV. He was the other big collector and patron figure of the Golden Age. So just to give you an idea of how different things were in this first phase of the 16th century in the different regions. So you have Castile here, so very like sort of northern sort of origin of painting, all very sort of contained, very hieratic, is that a word? Hieratic, thank you. Valencia, you can't tell who was the influence behind this. Da Vinci. If you think of the Virgin of the Rocks, that hand, like it's almost exactly the same, and you see the same face in St. Catherine of Alexandria. So Yáñez de Almedina was a faithful disciple of Leonardo da Vinci. In Catalonia, things were slightly weird. they are always slightly weird. I didn't say that. I didn't say that. So you see this mix of influences in Pere Fernandez and in Joan de Borgoña. So it's very eclectic, if you like. And in Seville, you see like quite conservative sort of painting. Nothing too special, if you like. It's interesting, the Virgin of the Navigators, because the theme of the discovery and the conquest of the New World was largely ignored by painters and patrons, funnily enough. And according to Jonathan Brown, there's no explanation for this, so I have no explanation for it. So we come to the revolution of Philip II. So he had been educated in Spain first, and then he had been to Italy, Germany, and the Netherlands. And that sort of opened his eyes to the big art, if you like. So, and he started collecting. He also liked to practice painting and sculpture himself. He met Titian, and he was completely wowed by him. Titian would be the unofficial court painter of Philip II, so he would never come to Spain. He always refused to come. Don't know why. But he would send lots and lots of paintings by commission of Philip. And then he went on a second trip to the north at the end of the 1550s. And when he came back to Spain, he really did not like what he found. So once he became king, he had the court fixed in Madrid. He moved it from Toledo to Madrid. And like I said, he centralized politics and arts in the same place. And basically, the crown was the main patron. The church was still important, but like the king was like the big patron. And he established a proper team of royal painters, and among them there was the first among equals, the court painter, and everyone wanted that, obviously. So he commissioned foreign artists like Titian or like Anthony's Moore. Here you have Mary Tudor, Queen of England, who was second wife of Philip II. That's why he commissioned this portrait. And like you say, it's very sort of regal, very exactly, so very austere. Like that's the sort of thing that Philip liked. And that detail, that refinement in textures that you see in Alonso Sanchez Coello is like that was one of his favorite Spanish painters, because he followed Anthony Moore's style. And obviously you have El Escorial, that's where I lived, that's where my parents live, not in the palace, but yeah. I've been asked that before. Philip had a need for many painters for the many palaces and country houses he had inherited and started renovating. The main one was the Alcázar, the Royal Palace in Madrid, which is now lost. But his huge undertaking was the monastery of San Lorenzo del Escorial, and he had an array of artists coming from all over the place to work on the decoration. And the artistic program was basically the defense of the Catholic faith against the Protestants, which was what was happening, outside of the borders of the peninsula. So what he wanted was clarity and credibility of detail, which is what he found in Alonso Sanchez Coello, which we've seen the portrait of the Prince before, and in Juan Fernández de Navarrete. When you see this painting in real life, it is incredibly gruesome. But they loved it. I mean, the king loved it. So yeah, it's like St. James's throat is half cut, and you can see it very well. This is not very nice, but yeah. But also, like I said, Italian painters flocked to Spain, and you have many paintings by Federico Zuccaro in the Basilica do Sale d'Or, so one of the reliquary cupboards in the Basilica. And the Martyrdom of St. Lawrence, that painting by Tibaldi, that's the main painting of the main altarpiece in the Basilica. So when you come to El Escorial, I say when because you are going to come at some point.
Is that our next trip?
Yes. Little bit far, but yeah. No, I definitely recommend you to come. Not that I'm biased, but yeah, it is amazing. And obviously, you have the odd one out, which is El Greco. I think you saw some paintings yesterday by Greco. So he's one of the weirdest artists that ever lived. To me, he's one of the most wonderful, but he's like Marmite. You either love him or you hate him. There's no in between. So he was Greek. He lived in Italy for a while, didn't have much success, came to Spain, and in his first few years, he managed to annoy both the Dean of Toledo and the King, which were the two most powerful people in the country. Yay! So he managed to annoy the Dean with this one, with this robbing of Christ, and to annoy the King with the martyrdom of St. Maurice and the Theban Legion. I'm not going to go into the details of why he annoyed them, but it was basically not the style they were looking for, and iconographically there were a few issues as well. Like, for example, in the martyrdom of St. Maurice, putting the martyrdom itself, the scene, in the background instead of in the foreground. And like, whereas in the foreground they're like sort of like negotiating, like, is it worth the martyrdom? Is it not? Is it not? So the king really didn't like it. But he went back to Toledo and he managed to, by taking more commissions from different churchmen, he managed to acquire the admiration and friendship of the most learned and pious men in Toledo, with very high intellectuals, and they were more open to this sort of ideas. So very, I don't know, like it is the art of El Greco is weird, but is highly symbolic, if you like, and so obviously very intellectual people would be attracted to that. So the use of the colours and the expression, like how he expresses the truths of faith, that's what attracted them. So these two are two of my favourite paintings in the whole wide world. So the Trinity, and which is in the Prado, and the Burial of the Count of Orgaz, which we went to see very recently. So yeah, it's amazing. I could just get a chair and just like sit there for hours. It's beautiful. With Philip's son, Philip III, we get into a period when, Philip III, unlike his father, he was not very interested in art. He was also not very interested in governing a country. And he was quite a weak king. So he very quickly left everything into the hands of the Duke of Lerma, which is my second surname, so I'm assuming that he's a very, very, my great something grandfather. He was very ambitious. He was a big patron of the arts. And look, like comparing these two portraits, which are by the same artist, you can tell who is in charge here. No, like he's like, yeah, I have the stick, you know. He's like, I have it, you know. Like he's definitely the one, as we say in Spanish, cutting the cod. Cutting the fish. That sounds really weird in English. I just want to show you a couple of examples. Maino is such a delight of a painter. He became a Dominican, and that ended his career earlier than planned, I suppose. But he was the only Spanish artist that was profoundly influenced by Caravaggio, Paolino, because all the painters took things from Caravaggio, but the style of Caravaggio was never like taken very strongly, if you like to say. I mean, you have Ribalta working in Valencia here with the Christ embracing Saint Bernard, which is a really beautiful painting, and he uses this incredible naturalism to express religious feelings. And in Seville, Seville was the exclusive port for trade within the New World. It was a very cosmopolitan city, with lots of merchants from all over the place living there. But this sort of excitement didn't extend to the arts, mainly due to the conservative taste of the religious authorities. So it was the church that was dominating in Seville more than the king, because the king was a little bit far in Madrid. And the churchmen were a little bit more conservative. They wouldn't have liked El Greco or anything like that. So if you look at this painting by Pacheco, Francisco Pacheco, who do you think he was the master of, judging by that painting? Who was Pacheco the master of? It begins with V.
Oh, yes.
Ha ha ha. Yes. So Velázquez changed everything. If you say like, changed everything. Has nothing to do one or the other. All due respect to Pacheco, but it is nothing like this. His style, his naturalistic style, is completely unprecedented. His choice of subject matter as well, but that's a portrait of his master Pacheco, master and father-in-law. But he depicted genre scenes in a huge format, which was usually reserved for historical, religious, and mythological subjects. So, with a realism and attention to detail that I had never seen before anywhere. If you've never seen this painting in the National Gallery of Scotland, do go and see it, because it's just, you can eat those eggs. It's incredible.
I shall go tomorrow.
You're going tomorrow? Okay. Are you going to Edinburgh tomorrow? Go. So, and also he depicted some biblical scenes as genre scenes. So he depicted like the genre scene in the foreground, wonderful still life there, and with all these sorts of very mundane figures, very like everyday people, and then the actual religious scene is at the very back. It's Christ talking to Martha and Mary. So that was definitely very original. And he was also a prodigiously talented portrait painter, because he was not only very realistic, but he doesn't idealize the sitter. So you get the personality of the sitters oozing from the canvas. I am quite scared of Pope Innocent the 10th. I don't know about you. I mean, I'm quite scared of this Mother Veronima as well. Like, it looks like she's going to hit you with the cross. But yeah, so Philip IV is the other big collector and patron figure in the Golden Age. So he was as passionate about arts as his grandfather, but he was very young when he ascended the throne. And like his own father, he also left everything in the hands of a very powerful and ambitious nobleman, which in this case was the Count Duke of Olivares. He was one of the most fascinating and complex figures of the Spanish 17th century. Lights and shadows, more shadows than lights. But Velázquez came to Madrid thanks to him. Olivares made it possible for Velázquez to go to Italy, and there he had a contact with all the great Italian masters. He also had contact with Rubens, so they met, and he tried his mythological painting, which was not very common for Spanish painters. So it was all the mythological paintings would come from Italy, but they wouldn't be commissioned to Spanish painters, so Velázquez did that for the first time. Sorry, it was Rubens that made it possible for Velázquez to go to Italy, not the Count Duke. Rubens made it possible. And he also obviously depicted some of the victories of the king, like the famous surrender of Breda. So he's interpreting a clash of arms as a clash of emotions. Like, it's not like, I'm so powerful and I defeated you. He's actually, Spinola, which is the general that has won, is actually greeting the Dutch general and not allowing him to kneel before him. So they meet as equals. So that also is like good publicity for the king as well. So we are so merciful. Meanwhile, in Seville, we have obviously Zurbarán. He wowed all the churchmen there with his spectacular realism and the contrast of light and dark, and that power of like conveying the spiritual message literally through your senses. So he was the leading painter in Seville for quite a while. He also worked in the royal courts. This is another one of my favorite paintings ever. And if you went to Bishop Auckland yesterday, you might have seen some of these. So his series of Jacob and his 12 sons. Rivera, like El Greco, is a bit of an odd one because he spent most of his life and his career in Italy. He always acknowledged his origins. He always signed as Rivera Español. always, but he never wanted to go back to Spain, despite being asked to. He famously said, I judge that Spain is a pious mother to foreigners and a very cruel stepmother to her own native sons. Because of that idea that foreign painters were like great and native painters were like, we are still a bit like that. So, yeah. But anyway, he wasn't really abroad, he was in Naples, and Naples was part of Spain anyway. So he definitely has influence of Caravaggio in the use of the light effects, but his style is much more naturalistic than Caravaggio, much more accessible and with incredible detail. If you ever go to the Prado Museum, you go to see the Saint Andrew. Like his skin, like the hairs of his chest, like every single hair is just incredible. Like he looks like a real person. It's absolutely amazing. He got a reputation as a specialist in very gruesome martyrdoms, but he actually emphasizes the faith of the saints in question rather than the pain. Because Saint Philip is actually looking towards heaven, and he has a very faint smile in his lips, so he's actually not that aware of what's happening outside of he's having the beatific vision at that point. And then the last 25 years of the reign of Philip IV were marked by a political and economic disaster and decadence, but artistic development. So Velázquez produced some of his most famous paintings in this period. You see Las Meninas, that's like one of the most famous paintings of history of art, like rivers of ink.
Bishop Auckland.
There is
It's a study.
It's a study, yeah. It's a study. The painting is in the Prado, but yeah, there is one in Bishop Auckland. I wasn't expecting to find that when I went, and I thought, wow, this is good. So yeah, he changed. Like gradually, he changed his style. He had broader like brush strokes, and he became more impressionistic, if you want. Much less drawing than before. You have this in the National Gallery. If you haven't seen this in person, please go. Like it's just beautiful. It's absolutely wonderful. Although some people don't think that it is, and there was this crazy lady that slashed it. It's one of the most beautiful nudes that has ever been painted in history of art. It was very provocative at the time, obviously, but it is absolutely beautiful. And the Fable of Arachne, also in the Prado Museum, that's also one of his main ones. And then, like I said, the influence of Rubens was really big in this period. He was important in Velázquez's career, but his general influence in Spanish art was determinant since his visit at the end of the 1620s. So loads of his paintings were in the royal collections, and especially after his death, the king got as many paintings by Rubens as he could, and also all the noblemen and churchmen did. So apart from his own style of that energy and that sort of how would you describe it? Just busy, just full of lots of energy, lots of stuff. Euphoric. That's a good one. Yeah. But the other contribution Rubens made was to rekindle the interest in the art of Titian, which had gone a little bit sort of lost because he did a lot of copies of his works. One of the followers of Rubens, as you can tell, is Herrera the Younger. All this this triumph of Saint, how do you pronounce that? Hermenegild. All these movements, all these little cherubs or angels going on in a sort of swirl of going up to heaven, and all this color. That's very Rubenesque. And it was the time of theatricality and architectural illusionism. This is the Church of San Antonio de los Alemanes in Madrid, absolutely covered in painting, and the ceiling stops there. So all that is fake. All that is painting.
Like Sant Ignazio.
Is the same idea. And then in Seville, in this period, in this last period, you have the two big names, Murillo and Valdés Leal. So Murillo supplanted Zurbarán as the city's main painter in the 1650s, and he's the master of devotional pictures. He's been unfairly, in my opinion, regarded as cheesy because he only portrayed beautiful scenes at the time when people were dying of famine, of plague, and there was a huge economic decline, and Seville was an absolute dreadful place by that time. But I think it's absolutely beautiful. So I like beautiful things. I think when things are going really badly outside, you want to look at beautiful things, don't you? Like, he stayed in Madrid as well, so he learned, this is the Holy Family with a Bird, another one of my favorite paintings of the whole wide world. That's more exact, if you like, in the drawing. After he stayed in Madrid, he learned a more open, sketchy brushstroke as well, and more vibrant colors. But unlike Herrera, which we're seeing with Herrera, which we saw here, his art is calm, is soothing, is reassuring. You feel better when you see a Murillo painting. I mean, he did many versions of the Immaculate Conception, but they're all over the place in prayer cards for some reason, because it's just, for a reason I meant, because it's absolutely beautiful. The Return of the Prodigal Son here, which is incredibly moving. And the other name is Juan de Valdés Leal, which I think you saw yesterday, the reproductions of this, which I have to say, the reproductions are amazing. Like, I was so impressed when I went to Bishop Auckland and I saw them. Because these paintings are above the two doorways of the hospital, charity hospital in Seville, so you can't actually see the details. So it's incredible and really good that in Bishop Auckland you can actually see all the details. He was the main competitor of Murillo, but he focused on the terror of death and all this striking realism and the detail, whilst Murillo focuses on the sweetness of salvation. I personally prefer Murillo because if you want to get depressed, you already have reality, why would you, you know? But I mean, we had the Vanitas Vanitatum session last year as well, and we covered Valdés Leal, so yeah, that's the other one. And the end came with the reign of Charles II, which he only lived for 39 years. So he was a very sort of short reign. Spain was a country by that time exhausted by war, impoverished by taxes, crippled by plague and famine. Charles was also not very well in the head. So yeah, it was basically a period of sheer decadence, but the arts flourished more than ever. There were altarpieces, pictures, theatrical representations everywhere, and more elaborated than ever before. So there had never been such difference between reality and what was depicted. So Juan Carreño was one of the court painters of Charles II. Then you have Claudio Coello is one of the big painters of this period. You see like this, again, this sort of energy, this St. Augustine is sort of going up to heaven in a swirl of cloud and color and angels. And La Sagrada Forma, that means the holy host. So it's sort of to do that sort of propaganda of the king being the protector of the faith. He hardly was anymore, the poor thing. I don't know what he had in terms of psychological health, but he wasn't very well. And then the other big master is Luca Giordano, who came from Naples, stayed in Spain for 10 years, and he worked in all the big palaces, in the Buen Retiro especially, and in El Escorial, and also in other churches in Madrid. Apparently, he only put the paintbrush down to eat, sleep, and take an occasional ride in a real carriage. So he was very, very busy. So this was a little bit like the time of Philip II, that he was a Spanish subject, even though he was Italian, and he was one of the court painters of Charles II. So yeah, and this is the vault of the former Hall of Ambassadors at the Buen Retiro. This is now, if I'm not mistaken, the library of El Prado Museum. So if you go to study there or read a book, you're so distracted just looking at the ceiling. So the king died in 1700, and that is considered to be the close of the Spanish Golden Age. Obviously, the art continued to flourish. Foreign painters continued to work in the country, but with the new dynasty, the Bourbons, that Hispanocentric vision of human and universal history was a thing of the past. So, thank you very much. Yes! I managed! I hope that wasn't too...
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm going to sit down.
Can I ask two completely unrelated questions?
Yes, you can.
Why do the Habsburg kings always wear black?
That is a very good question, actually, because black was the most expensive color at the time. It's not because they were like very depressed and sober. I mean, Philip II was sober, but it was because because black was the most expensive color.
Okay.
So and they wanted to show off, basically.
My second question. We just went through it quickly that there was a painting showing the temptation of Christ who was being tempted by a Franciscan.
Oh, there's a picture of St. Thomas.
No, Christ being tempted.
Oh.
It was at the beginning.
Oh, hang on. I need to check that one.
The devil was a Franciscan.
It wasn't that one. Okay, that's the temptation of St. Thomas. No. Okay. Oh, here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can't see it.
Hang on.
Yes, the one on the left.
That one. Yeah, so that you see the little horns, but yes, he is wearing a Franciscan habit. Yeah. And the foot is actually, it's not a foot, it's like how you say, like
Hooves.
a frog
Oh.
Oh, where
leg
feet?
thing. Yeah, like a frog foot. It's really, yeah, it's here.
Oh.
It's very small, but yeah, it is really weird.
It's like that.
Yeah, it's like very flat.
We'll have to go
yeah.
to Washington and see it.
I'm not sure why the devil has a Franciscan habit.
Well, I suppose he's trying to be in the guise of what's good, but twisting it.
I suppose, yeah. It's very anachronistic in the painting, but probably not for the audience. So, yeah.
Or perhaps Juan de Flanders just didn't like Franciscans.
Maybe. Right, Rose.
Oh, gosh. I don't
There
know.
you are.
I don't know how to follow that already. That was absolutely amazing. And I'm going to go around, not under the cable. All right. So, hi. I can see most of you here went on the trip yesterday. There are a couple of people who haven't. So let's just break this down nice and slowly. So, did we have a good time at the Spanish Gallery yesterday? Oh yes, excellent. Did we learn something new? Oh no. Oh, that's absolutely fine. Okay, so we're going to have a little bit of context on the Spanish Gallery, how it came up, how it was formed. We're going to have a look at some paintings. I've picked out a decorative object as well to have a look at. I think I've got about 5 paintings. We're just going to slowly make our way through, have a chat as a group and share our thoughts and our impressions if we are all right with that. So let's get started. So this is the main entry vestibule in the Spanish Gallery for those who have not been before. If we're going to have a brief overview, really the gallery sort of began by the reuniting of Zimmermann's Benjamin with the remaining 12 paintings in his Jacob and his 12 Sons series, which Irene showed a little earlier on in her presentation, the big paintings with the people standing. I would have had examples, but we've been pressed for time today.
But they haven't reunited them.
Well, they haven't reunited them, and I saw you were having a conversation with the museum guy, so do you want to...
They haven't reunited
And what did he say? Why did he give a reason?
No, he didn't know. Because it belongs to Ruffer, you know,
Yeah.
he was just one of the assistants.
But Benjamin doesn't belong to Ruffer, it's lent
No.
from wherever he's been. And also, I suppose, Bishop Trevor's copy of Benjamin.
But the
is
idea
very
was
good.
to reunite them, and you just used the word, and it was used yesterday, and they weren't reunited.
They are not reunited, and I agree with you, and I think it's a disappointment.
I'll point for that, yeah, go on.
Because to feed from your point, Ian, so Jonathan Ruffer bought the Bishop Auckland Castle in 2011 because Bishop Auckland, bless its cotton socks, is strapped for cash. It's a former mining town. It's very desolate. It's very sad. And they were going to sell these paintings. And Jonathan Ruffer, he's an investment banker, said, no, we will keep these paintings and I will buy the castle. And that really is the beginning of how the Spanish Gallery came to be. Jonathan Ruffer is a philanthropist. He collects Spanish Golden Age paintings, and he's regenerated the town square. And it's been a slow project, but it's coming to fruition. So the gallery itself, it comprises of the bank and the schoolhouse, and they've been converted into a very small 800 square foot art gallery. But this is deliberate because this stops us from being completely and utterly bombarded as viewers going around an art gallery, and it makes the curators have to think, actually, what is it that I'm putting up and why are we looking at it? The gallery was opened on Tuesday the 5th of April 2022 by the Queen of Spain and His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales, so it's very new, and it's curated according to the theme of ephemeral versus eternal. Did any of you pick up on that walking around? No. That's fine.
That's good feedback.
Yeah.
Because if they have to make that point.
Well, it was my third visit, and I only just gained that when looking at it. But either that's a comment on the readability of the literature in the museum, or the paintings are just that good that we can't read any of the text. We're just, wow, the quality is superb. So we could send some feedback. So let's look at what this ephemeral versus eternal means and looks like. So it's mainly Baroque art, and I was having a chat with one of you on the way to the train station in the evening, and my friend said, oh, I struggle with all of this piety looking at these paintings. And if I'm going to be honest, I really struggle looking at these paintings for the same reason. There is so much beauty and glory and intensity in the work. And the thing that we have to remind ourselves when walking around art galleries is they are an absolute Frankenstein of art. You have paintings from churches, you have predellas from, I don't know, one German church, you have a painting from a Spanish church, you have Picasso in a corner, just imagining what a typical gallery space is like, and works are commissioned according to light quality, people's tastes, preferences, and they can be highly overwhelming. And when you are trying to understand a work of art from a particular period, you really need to make several leaps in your own imagination as a viewer before you can really start to gel with the genre. So looking at a work of art in a museum, it is like catching the tail end of the conversation. You think, oh, what? You know, you're sort of caught off guard a bit. So let's just break down preconceptions and thoughts and, I don't know, possible inferiority complexes. I feel a bit inferior sometimes looking at paintings of Our Lady and crucifixion scenes. And let's look at what the Baroque actually entailed. So it's... Who's familiar with the Baroque here? I don't want to blab. Who's happy to sort of define what the Baroque is? I mean, Irene did a superb job. So, the Baroque basically contrasts, movement, exuberant detail, bold colours. You know, when you look at a Caravaggio, or when you were looking around the art gallery yesterday, and you have the light and the dark, and you have people in grand gestures, you feel quite close up to the action. That's what the Baroque really strives to attain as an artistic movement. It brings you closer to the religious scene that's happening, and it does address sort of, well, I think it addresses a lot of transience in life as a means of visual communication. So if we consider what sort of transience was happening in Europe, and particularly in Spain at the time, there was the unification of Spain in the late 1400s. It used to be a series of lots of small little kingdoms, and then King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella were married, Spain was unified. Then there was the Reformation, and following the Reformation, the Council of Trent, so big questions being asked about faith, religion, Catholicism, how to express Catholic thought in art. And then Spain suffered 3 great plagues, one from 1596 to 1602, the second from 1646 to 1652, and the third from 1676 to 1685. And final thing to take into consideration, Spain was rolling in resources through Spanish imperialism. The Spanish Empire, I think I read last night, it was bigger than the Roman Empire at its height. Yes, George is nodding, I feel reassured.
Because you also included the Americas and
Yes.
the East Indies as well.
Exactly, so it included the Americas and the East Indies. And you have to imagine all of these spices, all of these goods coming into the Spanish borders, upset that this might have caused. And then there was the 80 Years' War that took place following the Reformation. So the background, it's tumultuous. You're not quite sure what you're going to receive, you're not quite sure what you're going to lose. And big questions were asked in painting and in sculpture, or this is what the gallery is trying to express. So I thought we'd begin by having a look at Las Meninas. Did any of you notice it yesterday? Yeah?
And there's a very good little sort of film that they have.
Oh!
Yes, the film was great.
It was very good. You
It was very
didn't see
good.
it, yes.
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 Very much.
Yes, I didn't get a chance to look at it. It is considered the gold standard of the Spanish Golden Age, but also as painting as a medium. So, do you see any notions of transience or change in this particular painting? Go on, Father Daniel.
Well, it's just really sad because the Infanta there
Yeah.
is the focus of all the hope of the Habsburg dynasty.
Yes.
And she didn't live, did she? So,
She didn't.
so it kind of it's like, you know, we know the end of the story, and it's really sad.
It is very sad, I agree with you. Does anyone have anything else to...
But before that, her 2 brothers died, so she was
Yes.
the last hope.
Yes. Yes.
I suppose also the real power is only seen in a mirror,
Oh.
which the king and queen are in the mirror at the back.
Yeah.
And this is a whole new way of painting. It's their perspective, and they're looking to the future. But actually, it's like all you're looking at is through a glass darkly, and it's illusory.
So where's the vanishing point?
Well, if you look in a mirror, you're vain, aren't you?
Oh.
Yes.
No.
Oh, the vanishing point.
Yes.
You said vanity point.
No vanishing point.
Oh, I don't know. You tell us, Rose.
Okay. So typically,
In the open door.
it is in the open doorway. You're right. So typically, in a Renaissance painting, so Renaissance is like the grandfather to the Baroque. You know, you've got your vanishing point in the centre. Everything is balanced, proportioned. There's not much emotional drama. People are saints and martyrs, and everybody involved are very sort of in control, regal. The Baroque sort of paves the way for a lot more emotion. But the vanishing point, yes, would be where the king and queen are reflected out to us. But what Velázquez does is he shifts it, he moves it over to where the door is opening, and we don't know where that door opens to. And there is your eternity. The bright light coming through, shining over the Infantata, who was so sweet, so gentle, so, I don't want to say perfectly rendered, but sympathetically
She's a doll.
rendered. She's a doll, yes, she is a doll in her surroundings. Another thing,
But who's the lady in the door?
who's that?
No,
In the door.
In the door.
The lady, this one,
In the door.
In the stairs?
that's a man.
Ah, it's a man.
That is a man. I think that is a consort to Philip IV. I don't rightly know, because we could spend weeks and weeks and weeks talking about this painting, but I can find out for you. But yes, it's that shift in perspective, that question as to what painting can actually express, and it's really taken to the ends in this particular painting as a medium. The dog as well is meant to symbolise Philip IV's impotence as well. I read it in the guidebook that you lent me.
I didn't know that.
No, I saw it, and I thought,
I mean, I'm not surprised.
well,
I mean, it's just the family, like, they kept intermarrying, and it's just that's
yes, and that's
one of the
Those
problems.
chins.
yes, the Habsburg
The chins,
Georgian,
that's
yes.
But why drag the dog into it?
Oh.
Why is the dog a symbol of impotence?
I mean, it's the opposite.
Well, dogs usually symbolise fidelity and excitement. That's why they usually
I think it might
dancing.
be the type of dog, maybe that particular type of dog.
Oh,
I
right.
don't know.
I mean, there are dogs which are so highly bred that they, like the Habsburgs, they
Yes,
come out.
they
don't
come,
yes.
Yeah, some of them maybe, yeah.
Yes. Okay, so the next work that sort of stood out, hands up, who would often walk past a still life painting?
You told me. I actually didn't show you any still life paintings, I'm sorry. Yeah. We tend to sort of like that.
Yeah, we do. But there's a lot that can be said in a still life painting.
Yeah.
If you're looking at the texture and quality and, oh, I'll move it, fine, Father Daniel. All right, well, right. What do we think the grapes and the apples represent?
They're so fresh.
They are
I
so
want to
fresh. I want to eat them too, but you can't eat them because it's an illusion. Yeah. Baroque. So the apples represent the fall of man. The grapes represent the Eucharist and the transubstantiation of the wine into holy blood. It's why the grapes are placed above the apples. And looking up close to the surface of the white grapes as well, there are little, the highlights have been brought out in shades of blue, which sort of give them a celestial quality. This is what the literature says at Bishop Auckland while I was looking at this work of art. But if you're not enthused, I will move on to the next painting. Yes. Oh, now, okay. Oh, what do you think?
Well, it's very sweet, but you also think, of course, the first thing is the kind of, it's a baby, and then, of course, it's also Christ who's going to die.
Yes, exactly. And do you see how his hands are resting on his side, pinching it? And yes. And you have that fragility of being an infant, but the sinisterness of what's going to happen to our Lord and Saviour, foreshadowing him in his gesture, it's quite tender. Does anyone else have?
It took me a while to see that his outstretched arm is resting on the cross. It's in shadow.
Is there a mark on his foot, on the right foot?
Yes,
Yes.
there is.
Yeah.
Yes. I think it's a bug, but I'm not entirely sure in person. I couldn't find a good enough quality photo, I'm afraid.
It's also the sky is sort of getting dark.
Yes.
There's a storm sort of about to happen.
Yes. Is it morning or is it night?
You don't really know, do you?
Exactly. Exactly. Alright. And then this marvellous painting of Our Lady, I saw caught quite a few people's attention. What do we think?
Is it Murillo?
No, I think it's Kano. So, she's absolutely huge. For those who haven't been, I'd say she's, you can't really see that on the camera. I'd say she's from the top of the ceiling down to the floor at least. And she evokes such joy, and you can really see that in the colour palette that's used. Whenever you're looking at a work of art and you think, oh, I don't know where to begin with this, I don't like it, or I'm bored by it, or oh, it just doesn't speak to me. Take a step away from it and think and come back and then see whether there's anything that you can pick out. And begin with the simple things as well, like looking at the colour, looking at the shapes that are used, the basic things that make the composition of the work, and then something will slowly emerge and speak to you. Do you see how her perfection is evoked by the two putti beneath her? One is holding up a mirror and she looks away from the mirror, away from vanity. And one is holding up a flower and she looks downwards, almost towards the flower. And she is not distracted by worldly things either.
Also one of the titles of Our Lady's Speculum Justitiae,
Did not know
Mirror
that.
of Justice.
Ah.
So that may also be part of the meaning of that.
Perfect, thank you. And move on to the next painting. Please work there. Ooh. So this is the Holy Family by Juan de Juanes. Isn't it beautiful?
I didn't show any paintings by Juan de Juanes, but he also worked in El Escorial in the times of Philip II. There's his Last Supper is in the, I think in the monastery there's copy, and then in the Prado there's the original, or the other way around, I don't remember, but yeah.
Yeah. So there's such intimacy in this work of art. Does it remind you of any artist?
Caravaggio,
Yes. How do you see Caravaggio?
the contrast of light,
Yeah.
dark and red.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can see the chiaroscuro, the contrast of light and darkness. The light seems to be emitting from Jesus as a child, with the perfection of how his skin has been rendered, the cleanness, and how Our Lady's face and how Joseph's face are glowing with Christ. And then that's contrast with the dark surroundings as well. So really we are focusing on God incarnate as a child. Also, Da Vinci. Do you see?
The face of Our Lady.
Yes, exactly. So Juan de Juanes was inspired by the paintings of Leonardo, and as Irene says, you can see it clearly in how Our Lady's eyes and her hair have been painted, the way that Jesus is looking out at the viewer as well.
It's also Spain is the epicenter of where devotion to St. Joseph is coming about in this period.
Okay.
And so it's St. Joseph had been much neglected up to that point, and particularly with St. Teresa of Avila, but also generally in Spain he comes to the fore right in that time.
That's a really helpful point, because you can see how he is actually in the foreground of the painting as well. And Our Lady is behind both of them as well.
And here, St. Joseph is still quite old, but as time went on, he became younger and younger and younger. To make him more, I guess, to make him more attractive to the viewer and as a saint as well, and to maybe to close the gap a little bit between him and Our Lady, to not look like so, like the contrast of age so big.
Yeah.
There's also sort of a theological point because, as in a book about St. Joseph, it says, old men don't walk to Egypt. The idea of Joseph as an old man actually is problematic, whereas in fact, if he's a strong young man who makes this giving of himself for the sake of Jesus and Mary, he becomes much more an image and somebody for men to imitate.
Yeah. I have a question actually. I was wondering this last night. Our Lady was immaculately conceived. Was St. Joseph?
The Church doesn't teach that,
No.
though there are some schools of Josephological thought, which I don't know about immaculately conceived, but there are some who propose that he may, like Our Lady, not have a body on earth. Certainly there are no relics of him, but the church hasn't defined that.
Yeah. Fascinating.
I heard on a podcast that there's still a debate now.
Yes, it is something. I think there would have to a lot more thought, theological discussion before we could bring that forward.
I observed that his tone of skin is a little bit more orange, and
Yes.
the Virgin and Jesus share the same color of skin.
Yes.
Like as he had been tanned a little bit more.
That's a very good question. So there are many answers to this. Firstly, Joseph was a woodworker. He worked with his hands. He would have been outdoors a lot more. But also, Our Lady has, according to church teaching, is born without sin. And the easiest way to depict that as an artist is through someone's skin. I'm probably going to be cancelled for saying that, but
that is what he's probably showing.
Yeah, that is
isn't
what
it?
he is
Yes.
showing.
It's a very white.
Yes.
But also Jesus, only his human nature comes only from Our Lady and not from Saint Joseph.
Yes.
So the contrast of the skin as well, I think. I mean, I'm just making this up. But
No,
I
sounds
think
that right. I think I've got two more. So this small model of a crucifix, did this catch anyone's attention? Yeah? Yeah? Jackie, what do you think?
I was very moved by that, and I can't remember where it was now for a second.
Second floor.
So it was in the second floor,
Yes.
but it did strike me after that. It's the way his legs,
Yes.
as if they've sagged, so that he's really being held by his hands.
Yes. I haven't thought of it like that actually. I'm particularly moved by it because it's a model, it's something that you can actually touch. As Catholics, we develop relationships with sculpture, with small models of our Lord and Our Lady. Often we touch their feet, don't we? Or we give them a little kiss in veneration, and it just brings that faith closer to us. But also, I think he's made of terracotta, or he's polychrome, on wood. How difficult that must have been to make. How tiny he is, how fragile this model must be. The blood spilling out of him, small glass beads. Imagine how painstaking it must have been, firstly to blow the glass that small and to get those little droplets, but then the comment that Christ's blood and heart are as fragile as glass. And we know what it's like when we've had our hearts broken and how we feel like we've been punched. and that relationship between feelings, our materiality, and the materiality of a decorative object, really strikes a chord for me personally. I'm a decorative arts historian rather than a painting and sculpture historian, so that this is my bias talking. Does anyone else have anything they want to say about this?
I think like the one on the left, like also I can feel like the weight, you know,
Yes.
the head is very well portrayed, like the whole physiognomy,
Yeah.
about the weight concentrating on the shoulders.
Yeah.
Like the scene, you know, that he had the weight. I don't know, it's very profound.
No, I agree. His head is very heavy, and that's emphasised by the shadows as well. You make a good point. You kind of want to help him by lifting his head up a bit, don't you? And then the final painting, we have the Penitent Magdalene by Louis Tristan. What do we think of this? Because
It's one of 2 or 3 penitent pictures
Yes.
in the museum yesterday. And I
Yes.
picked all of them up, particularly the one of David actually, but this one of Mary Magdalene is very, very, very powerful. Very powerful on an individual basis.
what do you find powerful about it, Ian?
Well, I was contrasting it actually with the one of David that was upstairs. There was a Giordano one of the penitent David, where he looked at it, he'd been horsewhipped and crying for about 5 days, and it was all in the open. When I thought he would have been quite happy that Uriah had just been killed in the battle and he was going to get his hands on Bathsheba. They could have done a really nice picture, but I didn't know where to go with Mary Magdalene because she'd always be penitent.
Yes.
And there was another picture of her with a jar of ointment actually, that was just
Oh,
near
yeah.
that one.
Yeah.
And that was a kind of balancing one to this, but it was it's where we all are really, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
She will always be penitent, but then if you look at everybody here, we will always be penitent as well.
Absolutely.
That's the cross we must all bear as Catholics and as people as well. The composition in this painting is especially striking because you have the heavy square of the table, which she's leaning on as well, and you just feel that weight of her heart sinking down in the work. And I'm just amazed by her biceps. I mean, I wish my biceps were that.
I was going to say, she's very strong.
Yes, but
There was another one by somebody else
Yes,
about
there
10
was.
feet away, just over on the left.
yes,
And that was a different
and she's
figure
very wispy,
altogether.
isn't she? That one, and she's got sort of strawberry blonde hair, and
That's right.
you can see her fragility. Whereas this one, you know, she's been crying in the desert
Yeah.
for however long she cried in the desert for, wearing a hair shirt. You know that she is suffering, and
having dark hair.
No, it's not normal. It's
No.
much more usual to have blonde hair because that's more exotic.
Yes.
And therefore it's also associated with sin and that sort of thing.
Yes. But then it makes
of her being on a journey, don't you? Like Ian says, if you juxtaposed it with the picture that was next to it,
yeah.
because she's kind of, is that a skull?
It is a skull, yes.
That's kind of looking forward to the crucifixion and then the role that she's going to play, isn't she? She's going to be the first person that sees Jesus resurrected. So you kind of see the progress that her penitence was making for her.
Oh, that's a lovely point. Thank you. Yeah. And I think we'll end our discussion on that. That's beautiful. So thank you everybody for coming on the trip yesterday, for coming to our talk this afternoon. And the next talk will be hosted by Renee, and it is on Caspar David Friedrich.
Yes.
So thank you very much. Yes.